Ah!
Unless Dawson being here, probably knock your heads in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Happy Amblin Retrospective, the retrospective series looking back at the works of Steven Spielberg and Adam Sandler. This week, we're talking about Mr. Deeds, the remake of the Frank Capra film, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. I'm your host, Diego Crespo. With me today is Ringo.
Yes, that's me. Until you said it out loud, I didn't realize that Adam Sandler really did remake a Frank Capra film.
Yeah, I never knew until we started doing this retrospective. So, yeah, a little weird.
You didn't know that? Did you not know of this movie, or did you not know?
I just never put them together. Like, I knew of Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, but like I didn't even watch it until like we discovered that, like, oh shit, this is a remake. And so I just watched it for the first time, and I have it on in the background with no volume as we're discussing it. I mean, I have Mr. Deeds Goes to Town on in the background, not the Adam Sandler film Mr. Deeds, the 2002 American comedy directed by Stephen Brill, the
who just did Little Nicky
of Adam Sandler. What were you gonna say?
I said he just did Little Nicky.
The
director of Heavyweights, the movie I defended, even though I haven't seen it in like 5 years. So maybe it really doesn't hold up.
Maybe. This one's also written by Tim Herlihy. Stacked cast as always. I was talking to you before the show, like I could not believe the people that keep popping up in these fucking things. Winona Ryder, who I'm a huge fan of, Peter Gallagher, Jared Harris, one of like the great actors of today.
You know what? I gotta go through something. I was watching this, and I watched the whole movie, Mr. Deeds, and then the end credits started playing, and I was like, holy shit, that was Jared Harris.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't hit me while I was watching it. But suddenly it was like, oh, holy shit.
Yep. And of course, John Turturro. My neighbor, John Turturro. Who I actually like a lot in this.
Yeah, John Turturro's always kind of going for it. He'll become...
Is this like 5 Transformers films, and he's always like, oh, that's nice. Like, I'm glad he's getting a paycheck.
Yeah, but his character in that is like the most insane guy.
Oh, yeah, like... Look, Transformers 2 is straight up one of the worst films ever made. Like, I don't think there's getting around that. But there are brief moments with, like, his character in particular that I'm just like, why is this making me laugh?
Is
like,
that the one where you see his ass?
Oh, yeah, that's not funny. But later, when it's just, like, him and this random dude who's never brought up in those films again because, like, nothing matters in those, he's, like, driving around as a distraction. He's like, one man, alone, betrayed by the country he loves. And he's playing that character on, like, a level of self-parody and self-loathing that is just honestly kind of incredible.
Is that the one where it goes on Bill O'Reilly in the beginning?
Okay, that I don't remember. I'm pretty sure that might be 3. That might be the Chicago one.
Yeah, I remember one of them, he's got a book, and he's promoting it on Bill O'Reilly. And he's like, you want to know the truth? Buy my book. Which, alright, hold up. Before we get into Mr. Deeds, let's go on one of our tangents. Transformers. One of the main things about those, like, early films is that the Transformers are, like, a secret. Like, the government manages to cover up all the Transformer activity.
Yeah, for a movie and a half. Let that be clear. I know my Transformers canon.
I don't know. I walked out of 2, and I never saw anything else after that, like, in its totality.
You would not be missing out.
Yeah.
you would not enjoy
them. I made that judgment for myself.
Yeah, good call for you.
I feel like I've seen all the best moments, like, in clips on YouTube.
That's kind of how you have to do those. If you can't, like, I could not sit through 5 in the theater but I did watch it at home, and I was like, oh yeah, I got a kick out of just like the billions of dollars they spent to like for a crazy man's tech demo. Well, like if I saw that in a theater, I know I would have hated it.
Yeah,
because he's just trapped there.
I'm not willing to go out. I'm not willing to call him a tech demo, though. That's your comment. I'm not endorsing that. But there's a shot, I think it's in the third one, because I think they played it in the trailers a lot, where it was like a bunch of like paratroopers jumping out of a helicopter while like other helicopters are crashing around them.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, holy shit, that's a great shot. And then like it's one of those things where I would see previews for those movies, and there'd be like something that looked really cool, and I'd be like, I have to remind myself that there's no good movie around that. And it's just like, just thinking about the waste, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like, that shot would be like the climactic shot of any other movie. And the problem with Michael Bay is every shot is that.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to differentiate it. And like, so for me, someone who loves like just guzzling garbage, I'm just like, fill me up, baby. But,
fill me up, baby. Diego Crespo.
Yeah, but
that's
yeah,
I want that out of context. I want that just. There you go.
Holy shit! Okay, so because Mr. Dean's on in the background, there's I forget which actor this is, but one of the dudes. I will put a screenshot and share it with the episode on YouTube or like on Twitter. He looks like one of the henchmen from The Last Boy Scout, who's also the projectionist from the 80s Blob.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That one guy did look like that.
Yeah. What actor is that, do you know?
I don't know his name.
Okay, yeah, he dies really badly in those two movies and not in Mr. Deeds.
Does he die in Last Boy Scout? What happens to him in that?
He's one of the henchmen who dies in the shootout in the forest, I think.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. It's one of those ones where it's like, okay, it's unclear who's who at this point.
Because he's in the scene where he punches the guy in the nose and kills him.
Yeah.
But he is not the one who gets punched in the nose.
Milo warned us to watch out for this guy. It's a great movie.
Great movie. Taylor Negron is like the scummiest villain ever.
Oh, yeah. Taylor Negron's character. What the fuck? Milo. Yeah. I just fucking said his name. Milo should be a villain in Mr. Deeds.
Oh, my God. That's what this movie is.
Oh, no, that'd be horrifying. Never mind. No, that changes the tone of the movie.
We really were robbed of the Shane Black, Tony Scott, Adam Sandler team up.
Fuck.
You know, it could have worked.
God,
you know,
I'm telling you, I want Adam Sandler to be in an action movie again.
Yeah, you could do it, but it's got to be a very specific type of character.
Yeah, well, I mean, your Shane Black idea, that's like perfect.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll see if Shane Black ever gets to make another movie again.
Yeah, we'll see. He's supposed to do something for Netflix called like Cold Soldier or something like that. And he's had it in development for like 12 years at this point. Like that was going to be what he followed up Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Like that was going to be his follow up to that, and then it took forever because it's his original idea. So
someone just let him make a sequel to one of his goddamn movies.
I know,
because all his movies
there's no
end
reason Netflix shouldn't buy the rights for The Nice Guys.
Yeah. Well, who produced The Nice Guys? Because that guy is one of those dudes that like won't let go of rights, even though
Joel Silver.
Oh yes, good old Joel Silver.
Yeah, but they work together on like almost everything except for like The Predator and Iron Man 3. Yeah, and I think The Long Kiss Goodnight. It's like only a handful of stuff that they didn't like work on together. I don't know. I don't know what I guess they just worked well enough together.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes there's very good director-producer relationships. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there are the worst kind of relationships.
Speaking of...
To bring it back, I know how to bring it back.
Okay.
Later in the series, we're going to be talking about James L. Brooks. We're not there yet, because the director of Spanglish... who also directed, I think everyone knows him for like Broadcast News and As Good as It Gets. Have you seen either of those two movies?
I have not. Should I?
Oh, well, before we do Spanglish, you should at least watch Broadcast News just so I can be like, look, this guy used to make good movies.
Aww.
You need to see, because we'll get to it, but like, Spanglish is like if broadcast news just didn't work. So you need to see it working to understand what he was going for.
Okay, some might say that Mr. Deeds is that version of Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Would you agree?
What the fuck are you saying? I was making a point.
Yeah, I know, but I was trying to get us directly to the film.
Yeah, I'm getting back to it. Jesus Christ.
Okay, fucking go.
Listen, I didn't even finish what I was saying. And I was
thought you were done.
No. Why would I bring up James L. Brooks?
I don't know.
Why?
I have no idea. Just go.
Anyway, James L. Brooks, his follow-up to Broadcast News, is a movie called I'll Do Anything, which no one remembers. And I'll Do Anything is kind of infamous where it was filmed as a musical, and then the test screenings were so negative, they went back and took all the musical numbers out. And then just released it as a movie. And from what I've heard, neither version works. But I bring it up because if I remember correctly, because not only is it a musical, it's also like a coming-of-age film, it's also a relationship drama, comedy, it's also a satire of Hollywood. Which, we just don't get enough of those these days. And one of the characters in it, played by Albert Brooks, I think, they start talking about movie projects that he's working on, and I believe there's a joke in it where it's like, we're going to remake Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, but as like a shitty comedy. And like less than 10 years later, that actually happened.
Wow.
So, yeah. This is why Hollywood satire doesn't work. Because it's so much more ridiculous than you can actually make it. Like, so that was my point.
All right. Well, would you say Mr. Deeds is a shitty comedy?
All right. This is a hard one for me. Mm-hmm. Because I try to play good cop on this series. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that I think that this movie's going for something. It's trying to take Adam Sandler in a different direction than he's been in. It's definitely trying to lean into the warm-hearted stuff, which we haven't seen him do since The Wedding Singer. And I think it's, like, fine, but it's also, like, just not that interesting. And it's one of those movies where it would work more if they just pulled, like, a handful of the jokes out. Mm-hmm. But even then, it wouldn't be, like, a great movie. It's just, like, some of the jokes are, like, real stinkers. And then others are, like, passable. But it's also, like, maybe his cheapest-looking movie to date. Other than Going Overboard.
Yeah, that one's always the asterisk. I think we can, like, remove that one from the equation generally just because, like, it was made for, like, $5.
Well, in his recent acceptance speech at the Independent Spirit Awards, he referred to Billy Madison as his first movie.
Wow, I forgot, yeah.
Well, I think I brought up on that episode that, like, on his old website, he wouldn't even list Going Overboard as a film he was in. So I think that's like the old shame.
He's done worse movies.
But like, all right. So here's the thing: I'm the good cop. I tend to come out of these movies going like, they were all right, even when they very much are not. So what did you think?
I don't think you have to worry about being good cop this time. I don't even really like this movie, but I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I found it far more enjoyable than some recent episodes we've had.
Okay.
The cast really helps. I mean, he's always working, again, like, with really talented people for some reason. I totally agree. It looks very cheap, though. Let me see, what did it cost to make? $50 million. It looks like it was made for $5 million.
Yeah, this is the beginning of, like, why did these movies cost this much money?
Yeah, it made a profit. It made $171.3 million. So, like, it did fairly well for the budget.
Well, and this
did not need to be that high.
This is his follow-up. This is, one of the Happy Madison films, and this is his follow-up to Little Nicky, which is like his only bomb at this point. And he's done like Happy Madison's produced like The Animal, which I think like broke even but wasn't like a huge hit. And
I
Joe
remember
Dirt
trailers for that movie.
What?
I remember trailers for that movie and just like that. Have you ever seen The Animal?
No, I've seen exactly one scene from The Animal, and it's a scene involving Norm Macdonald.
Okay, and yeah, that sounds about right.
It'll actually make you laugh. Like, it's a pretty. Just look up Norm Macdonald in The Animal, and it's like the only good scene in the movie.
All right.
And then the other movie they did produced was Joe Dirt. So he's like, this is like the beginning of producing movies for all his friends. Which Joe Dirt's become like a cult classic, but I've never seen Joe Dirt.
I remember watching it on Comedy Central. So like that's not even like even there you're grading on a curve because it's one of those comedies that they like radically edit for for cable, you know? And unless you're like watching it on Showtime or HBO, it tends to fuck up like the flow of the movie. Like I know some people watch Superbad for the first time on FX and I'm like, why would you do that? Like
yeah.
Like that probably fucked up the movie a lot because a lot of people that saw it like that did not like it. So I have seen Joe Dirt, but I was not a fan of it. But I've never seen it like in full. So
all I know is that there's a scene in Joe Dirt. Isn't like Christopher Walken in it?
Yeah, I think he's like. I'm like probably so wrong on this because I saw it in high school on Comedy Central. I think Christopher Walken's his dad. Someone's going to comment and say, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, that's what I remember.
Okay.
So, I could be wrong.
I just remember there's a scene in it where Christopher Walken threatens some, I think Kid Rock. He threatens to stab Chris Rock in the face with a soldering iron.
Oh, no.
I remember that went around. It was like, there was that time where everyone was like, Walken's the best. I'm like, I'm not exactly against that. But
well, speaking of getting stabbed, Adam Sandler gets stabbed in the foot in this.
Oh yeah.
This one doesn't have the weirdness of other Adam Sandler films, especially coming off Little Nicky.
That was the point I was gonna make, where it was like, because I defended Little Nicky much to your anger and frustration. And, like, here's the thing, and I know you're going to definitely disagree. I enjoyed Mr. Deeds about as much as I enjoyed Little Nicky. I definitely wasn't, like, there's definitely not, like, as many, like, awful moments in Mr. Deeds. But it's that thing where it's like, Mr. Deeds is more boring and generic, with occasional moments of levity. And then Little Nicky is just fucking, like, out of control, like, tons of miscalculations. Mm-hmm. That, like, the unfunniness of Little Nicky started to become funny for me when I watched it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, you know.
Like, but Mr. Deeds was kind of like, there's moments, definitely, but nothing to write home about.
Yeah, it's the difference between like a genuinely like awful film and something that you just kind of like, yeah, I'll forget about it in about a day.
You know what? Here's a weird comparison. Remember Cop Out?
Barely.
Did you see Cop Out?
Sean William Scott falls out of a tree in that one, right?
Yeah, I think he dies. Like, okay. Sean William.
Okay.
He dies, but he also...
That's the Kevin Smith one. He works with Bruce Willis on. Okay.
And that was the one that got, like, 1 star. He had, like, a terrible experience with Bruce Willis, who, like, sleepwalks through the whole movie. And then, like, that was, I think, when Kevin Smith went, like, on his whole campaign where he was, like, anti-film critic.
Oh, okay.
That, like, started that. And I saw that in theaters. Even after, like... It was one of those things where it was, like, my dad wants to go to a movie this weekend. What's playing? We'll go see Cop Out. And I saw it, and I just kind of watched, and I was like, that was fine. Like, there wasn't really anything offensive in it. And there were a couple moments that made me laugh. And I kind of, like, I didn't really understand the, like the critical, like, skewering it was getting. Like, I definitely wouldn't call it a good movie, but it wasn't, like, awful. And I kind of feel the same way about Mr. Deeds.
All right. I think the niceness of, like, the story generally, there, like all Adam Sandler stuff, it does lean a little conservative in its presentation, but there's like a warmth to this one where it counted for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I like my Adam Sandler. That's what I'm discovering going through this. I like my huggable Adam Sandler.
All right.
I like my nice guy Adam Sandler.
Well, this is definitely the era of likable Adam Sandler, which later we will get unlikable Adam Sandler to mixed results.
Yeah. Let me just say, I think we both made it clear that recent events have also shown a different side of Adam Sandler that I also appreciate. I do not require Adam Sandler to be a nice guy to be an interesting performer. Mm-hmm. And we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. But maybe we should say what the setup of this fucking movie is.
Oh, yeah. We're like 20 minutes in. A billionaire dies while climbing Mount Everest.
Preston Blake.
Preston Blake.
Billionaire Preston Blake.
Dies while climbing Mount Everest, and they can't find an heir for his, like, behemoth fortune.
I think they say he's worth $40 billion.
Holy fuck.
And, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's literally, like, more money than God.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because I shouldn't say that.
No, say it.
No, I was just gonna do like a really rude, like, that's because there is no God. I was like, that's not funny. Didn't the Pope go to visit people that were like suffering from the coronavirus, and now the Pope is sick?
What? I
heard
don't
that
know.
through the grapevine.
Oh wow,
that could be bullshit, but
oh no. But yeah, they can't find an heir for the fortune, and then after like a search, they discover that he has a grandnephew, right?
A grandnephew, like a twice removed or some shit. They don't really bother to explain the exact relation. It's just he's the only living heir, and that's Longfellow Deeds, played by Adam Sandler.
And he's a humble dude. From a place called Mandrake Falls, New Hampshire. I do not know if that's a real place, but he loves writing greeting cards and selling them to Hallmark, or trying to sell them to Hallmark. And he's just like a nice dude. He's not down his luck in this one. I think he owns like a pizza place, like a pizza parlor in this one. Right?
He's like a humble guy, which is very odd for Adam Sandler to play, frankly. Mm-hmm. And he's a humble guy. He just, this is where we get kind of like, I wouldn't even call it conservative, but like middle America of like, the best people in this country are people that just show up and do their jobs and are happy. Yeah. That's kind of the myth of, I guess, the middle America dream. Because there's kind of like this weird thing where the American dream is that like anyone can make their fortune and become somebody in this country. But like most people, I think, understand that doesn't happen.
I would say that at the time of this release, probably less people understood that. I think now more than ever, especially with like the election looming in front of us. I think now we're like breaking barriers with that. I
think we're now just being more overt about it. I think we're just being more overt about how actually accumulating wealth is not a good thing. Which is this discussion we haven't really had for a long time. Mm-hmm. But middle America kind of always has this attitude of like, it's not about becoming the richest person. It's just, being a kind and dutiful person. Which is why I think his movies kind of appeal to like the heartland and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I just find like comfort in this like story. It is complete like nonsense, and not even like that exciting nonsense. But I'm like, yeah, if it's on cable, I'd probably check it out again.
Well, it's a fun setup, And then this is definitely a movie where both versions of this film are very much movies about, like, the city folk versus, like, rural America.
Yeah. And, like...
Which is where I think the messaging in both movies kind of gets problematic. Because it kind of does that weird thing where it's like, it tries to act like there aren't as many working class people in the city, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cities tend to be home to, like, a lot of immigrants, and they tend to be more diverse. And they say, like, the reasons why cities tend to be more liberal is just because they're more diverse locations. And these movies kind of paint cities as being like, oh, well, the elitists live in the city, and then the real Americans live out in Mandrake Falls. Although they never make it like that. They're never that overt with it. And I actually am willing... I have a feeling, because it's more overt in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and I feel like they might have trimmed it back in this film, because this movie was shot before the September 11th attacks. And I feel like they might have wanted to, like, ease up on the, like, being down on New York City, you know?
Uh-huh.
In fact, there's a scene when he's flying to the city. I think there's ADR of Adam Sandler screaming, like, the greatest city in the world, which was, like, the attitude of, like, you know, late 2001, mid 2002.
Yeah, I mean, just look at, like, Raimi's Spider-Man, you know. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah, it's that exact same thing. Where it's like, you know, New York City suddenly went from, like, the cesspool of the country, which it very much, like, wasn't, but that was, like, just the general idea, to then, like, no, greatest city in the world. And my dad, you remember the movie Deep Impact?
I do.
My dad said that when he saw that in theaters, when the tidal wave hits New York City, the audience cheered.
Wow.
So...
And that was only like a year or two before 9/11, right?
I was like 94, 95.
Oh, what the... Oh, I'm thinking Armageddon.
Armageddon, yeah. Well, no, it's same year, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, oh, okay, so yeah, Armageddon was 98.
Okay. Because they were like that, they were the classic, like, dueling movies thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and, like,
Deep Impact.
Yeah, and, like, Deep Impact was the Spielberg-produced one. And I think Armageddon, like, beating it is kind of what got Spielberg to be like, I want to be in the Michael Bay business. Which I think he would come to regret.
Yeah. I wouldn't... I'm a Bay fan, and even I'm like, I don't know which one I recommend more of those, not to get into a whole other Bay thing, but...
Well, I could do a whole thing on Deep Impact versus Armageddon. But I'm not going to do that. Well, Deep Impact, I believe, was directed by a woman.
Yeah, oh, shit, hang on. I'm just going to shout her out really quick. Who was it?
We're racing to...
No. Mimi Leader.
Oh, yes. She did Pay It Forward.
I don't know what else she did.
She did The Peacemaker, which is fine, and then Pay It Forward, which is like one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Oh my god, okay, speaking of films we watched in middle school, which is not what we were talking about.
Oh, did they make you watch Pay It Forward too?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It was one of my favorite teachers ever, to this day. Saint of a man. Absolute saint of a man. And in the back room, this was actually high school, because he was a religious teacher. I went to a religious private all-boys school. And in the back, there were two posters to teach us morality for two of his favorite films. One of them was Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. The other one was Pay It Forward.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's unwatchable.
Like, look, I get this, like, I get the sentiment of... No, I don't. Like... Fuck that movie.
It tries to, like, monetize fucking empathy.
Well, it's like, you know, oh, this kid helps 3 people, in exchange you gotta help 3 people. And it's like that thing of, like, oh, that'll, like, exponentially expand until everyone's helping everyone. And it's like, that doesn't, you know... That's a nice thing. Doesn't really change much.
I think it's a cynical approach of like, why don't we all just get along? You know,
Yeah,
like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, it's just words.
It's just nonsense. And spoiler, fucking Haley Joel Osment gets stabbed in the last act of that film and dies because he's Jesus. I mean, good Christ, fuck that movie. I'm sorry, they made us watch that I can't even remember why. Like, I don't remember what the reasoning for it was, but we watched it in middle school, and I'm like watching it, and it's like, good Lord, this is a piece of shit. But it's like, I get it, they're trying to teach us a lesson, and then the fucking kid gets stabbed, and it's like, what the fuck?
You know what? Pay it forward. Not to get off Mr. Deeds, because I am someone who's like, no, I like the niceness of that story. But Pay It Forward is like that cynical, manipulative bullshit. It reminds me of life itself. It honestly does. I think we brought it up before. But yeah, that the same exact vibe I got.
I haven't seen Life Itself, but from what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like one of these movies where like people who are not equipped to tackle social problems suddenly decide to like make a social movie. You know?
Yeah, and it tends to be white people. They're always like, you know, we'll all just get along, and yeah, things will be sad and bad,
that's
but it'll be okay.
That's the white answer to everything. Mm-hmm. It's why can't we all just get... I mean, it's the reason why so many of the people running right now are running on a campaign of we shouldn't be so divisive. As if that's the biggest issue facing this country right now.
Yeah, I not to just get even further away from Mr. Deeds.
No, keep going. Dig it.
Like, I've seen that criticism lobbied at the Raimi Spider-Mans, and we did bring it up as, like, kind of an important discussion point, too, especially with Spider-Man 2, where it's like, you know, things are rough, but, you know, as long as you have each other. But those films are also, like, interested in like
but those films
economic
also
struggles of those
characters. They don't pull the punches on what the people are actually going through.
Yeah, and
you know?
Something like Pay It Forward or Life Itself absolutely
or
do.
Crash is another one.
Oh, fucking... You know what? I found out a relative of mine was like, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite movies, and I had to like stop myself. I was like, no, this is a family member you care deeply about. It's just a movie. It doesn't mean anything about their personality or their beliefs.
I saw Crash as a child. Like, I want to say I saw it around the same time I saw Pay It Forward, and like I didn't have the capacity to hate it at the time. But it was one of those movies where it was like, I remember watching it and being like having the mental, you know, faculties to be like, okay, this is a movie about race and racism. And then I'm like, wait, even as a kid, I was like, that didn't really, like, they didn't make a point about anything. But these are movies movies like Pay It Forward, movies like Crash, movies like Life Itself, they don't take place in any reality that has ever existed across the multiverse. Like, there's nothing functional in any of them. It's like they exist in a solid state universe.
Unlike Mr. Deeds.
Unlike
Mr.
Mr. Deeds.
A socialist manifesto.
Well, we'll get to that, I guess.
No, I do not actually believe that. But I think you could kind of draw lines about... Like, if you really bend over backwards and make some, like, Mr. Fantastic level stretches, you could be like, no, this is a pretty progressive film by the end.
You know what? I would say the thing about this is where this movie has a very different ending than Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. I'll just fucking skip to it. Fuck it.
Yeah, whatever.
Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Mr. Deeds, he tries to... Correct me if I'm wrong. He tries to give his entire fortune away. And then all these people that are, like, kind of riding his coattails and, like, need his influence have him committed and say that, oh, he's insane. And we're going to put him on trial so we can take away control of his wealth. They just, like, try to block him from giving away his money.
Yeah.
And that becomes the climax of the film. Here, they didn't do that ending, but they took another Capra film and they tried to do, like, a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. except instead of Congress, it's like a bunch of billionaires and investors, and Mr. Deeds gives a rousing speech where he convinces all the billionaires to not sell a company that will put a bunch of people out of work, and instead, like, do the right thing, I guess.
I get it's like for people who believe in moral capitalism.
Yeah, well, it's like it literally is the myth of the ethical billionaires.
Yeah.
And it's like it's basically going like, oh no, the wealth isn't the problem here. It's the problem is people being greedy. And it's also very. Have you ever seen Other People's Money?
No.
Other People's Money. It's a Danny DeVito's in it.
Oh shit! No, I gotta watch it now.
I don't know if you have to. I haven't seen it in forever. It's DeVito and I think Gregory Peck is the other guy, and DeVito is a liquidator. It's kind of like a Wall Street-esque film, and he's like, I think they even call him Larry the Liquidator, and he's coming in to like liquidate a company that like has a bunch of I think it's a car manufacturer company, and there's a scene in it. It's actually like it's a pretty good scene, but I think the movie kind of like wimps out on it, where Gregory Peck, who owns the company, gives a speech where he's like, look, we don't make the most money, but we can make this company turn a profit. There's a bunch of people's jobs on the line. Did we forget? He kind of gives very similar to what Mr. Deeds says, and kind of wins over the stockbrokers. And then Danny DeVito gets up and gives another speech where he's like, hey, look, this is actually a good thing to liquidate this company because we're all going to make money that we can then invest back into the economy. And, like, wins, like, the whole thing back. It's a very interesting moment. And a movie that I don't think really knows what it's doing with itself. But it's also a movie that kind of goes, like, even... like the ethical idea of capitalism just doesn't work. Like that, the other option is always going to be more lucrative, and you can kind of convince yourself the more moral choice, which I believe is what billionaires do.
Yeah, I would say part of the problem with both the Deeds films as well is kind of. I mean, we were talking about it with like. The heartland of America, and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town specifically as something that's like, oh, back in the old days with like real Americans, people that really fought for like the everyman. It's a very romanticized version of something that never existed. Yeah. It doesn't mean there's not things to fight for, obviously. Just look around.
Well, it's interesting because that film came out in the middle of the Depression, so like it all has like a different meaning in that context. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting where like it does draw that harder line between city folk and country folk. Mm-hmm. But it does end with more of a like, people shouldn't be allowed to be that rich if other people are starving.
Yeah.
Which is
it's pretty radical.
I think at the time it was because that was at the era of like socialism was actually still like a discussed thing, Mm-hmm. I don't think that like socialism as a choice doesn't really die until like the Red Scare. I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't like, there's the anarchist bombings and there were definitely people that reacted negatively to socialism in this country, but I think the Great Depression kind of like was one of those things that woke people up to be like, hey, let's try anything.
Yeah.
And then after World War II, like that like fucks it up because then it's like, well, the Nazis called themselves socialists, so that's going to fuck that word up forever. And then the other thing is communism, so if you can just call anything communism, you fuck it up,
Yeah.
But it's I think I brought this up on another episode maybe, or I was talking to you in private, I don't remember. Where I said that, like, the weird thing about the United States of America is that we all kind of agree that the social programs of the New Deal were a good thing. Now, there's always, like, the Ann Coulters of the world that will be like, actually, it made the Great Depression last longer. Which, who fucking knows? But, like, we all kind of agree that, like, regardless of whether it ended the Great Depression, we all like the social programs that came out of the New Deal. Mm-hmm. But the moment we started going post World War II, we started going like, hey, maybe we can give these benefits to black people as well. Was the moment we turned on all social programs in this country.
I don't know. You probably hear this too from like assholes, but the mentality and the dialogue about like, well, like if there's free college and free healthcare, it becomes like a little less special for everyone. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I have heard that from like an actual human being's mouth, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like that's literally insanity and like just evil. I think it's also important to say that kind of that wordage, that phrasing is straight up like evil.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's that weird banal evil where that person like has no idea like what they just said.
Yeah.
Like, the worst part is that person walked out of that room thinking they made a great point. Like,
oh no, totally. I mean, this brings up. Here, go ahead.
No, I've been around a lot of people that have said, the other one that's going around now where it's like, hey, if we take care of student debt, what about all the people that paid off their loans? And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to make an equation, but it's like trying to be like, that's not a solution.
Yeah.
And it's basically going like, we can't solve the problem because it hurt other people. It's literally going like, if I went like, hey, I don't want people to get free healthcare because I've been paying for my healthcare the whole time.
Yeah, and that is also another common like part of the discussion, unfortunately. People are like, well, I pulled myself up from my bootstraps kind of dialogue.
I think that's what people have convinced themselves it's about, but it's the real thing is that everyone in this country that isn't a multimillionaire really is a couple of steps away from just like a couple bad things away from like complete financial ruin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you wreck your car, your water heater bursts, and you end up in the hospital all in the same week, you're fucking broke. And that's not a great place to be. And people that are in that realm, even if they're making like, $600,000 a year, like, it's like the middle class is just fucked.
Yeah, I think it's like there's a lot of like studies about that right now, where it's like, yeah, the middle class basically doesn't exist, anymore. Like,
and I think, it's that thing where they, the middle class can't really see that. It's class warfare where they basically keep the lower and middle class fighting each other, so none of us ask about the upper class.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a fucking mess out there these days. I feel like people are starting to wake up. But
I really do too. I stumbled across a quote from a documentary TV film called Frank Capra's American Dream, and I haven't seen it, but I believe it opens with a John Cassavetes quote that was pulled from like old recordings and interviews. Because the TV film was released in 1997, Cassavetes died in the 80s, and the quote is, maybe there really wasn't an America, maybe it was only Frank Capra. And I think that kind of like, what he's saying, at least to me, is that like, it was like an ideal, like, romanticized fantasy, like, all of this, like, it is captured on celluloid, but like, that wasn't real. Like, that was a creation. Even if it's from a lot of talented people, like, again, Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life, I do consider to be one of the greatest films ever made. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, not so much, but it is not something tangible.
The only problem with It's a Wonderful Life is Mr. Potter must be killed. Like, there's no other way to end that movie correctly. Like,
I've never heard it put that way, but sure.
That's my philosophy in life these days, is Mr. Potter must be killed. Because not only is he a rich asshole, he steals the money.
Yeah.
He's an awful person. You ever see the fabled lost ending of It's a Wonderful Life?
No.
It's an SNL skit. It's Dana Carvey, and it's literally just the ending. But then at the very end, Uncle Henry is that it? Is Uncle Henry the dope who fucking loses the money?
Wait, let me make sure here.
Well, it doesn't. It's whoever it was. The
Uncle Billy.
Uncle Billy. All right. The old fuck who forgets where the money is and forgets what happened. Played by Phil Hartman, is like, wait, I remember, it was Mr. Potter. And then they're all like, well, let's go get him. And then they just go over and it's John Lovitz as Mr. Potter, and they just beat the shit out of him. That's the it's the fabled lost ending to It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's a good one. But I think you're right about there was only Frank Capra. Back to the point you were making.
Yes. There is no reality to this vision of America's past.
Well, I would say that the big culprit in that instance is television, and I think it says a lot that Frank Capra movies are notoriously became huge on television back in the day.
Yeah, like I was telling you, I think before the show even, I watched It's a Wonderful Life, and what the fuck else? What the fuck? Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The first time I watched those were on television. Mm-hmm. So, you got a point there.
Although Mr. Smith is one of those movies where it's you really at least for me, on some level, you want to believe the country can work that way, you know? Mm-hmm. That the one guy doing the one speech can get the corrupt guy to admit he was a corrupt bastard.
Instead, no, totally, yeah. And I don't even think there's anything inherently wrong with finding joy and pleasure in that, you know.
Instead, the Mitch McConnells of the world grow legion. But both Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington both have moments where he goes and looks at the landmarks and shit. He's obsessed with going to Grant's tomb and Mr. Deeds, which isn't really in the Sandler Mr. Deeds.
No. This is not as big a point either, but I think kind of the wonder of Frank Capra movies too is even though they're very romanticized fantasies of reality, he imbues them with little character choices. There's a moment where Mr. Deeds slides down the railing of his new house, and there's a statue at the end of it, and he just kind of admires what he just did, haha, little skip to a step, and just as he's passing by, lightly taps the foot of the statue and goes about his day. It's not a huge thing. I just found it very charming. And
meanwhile, Adam Sandler does it, and he slips and falls on his ass.
Different strokes.
I guess the other thing to point out is that Gary Cooper plays the original Longfellow Deeds.
Oh, yeah.
The strong, silent type. And
it's so funny, the difference between the two.
I know. Well, here's the weird thing. What I didn't expect, because I had actually never seen Mr. Deeds before doing this. What I didn't expect was that Longfellow Deeds is kind of a weirdo in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. He is kind of a country bumpkin type dude. And he's kind of not all there, but he's not he's a good-hearted guy. But he's also just kind of he's kind of a creep at times. And there's a weird intensity to him, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just because it's Gary Cooper, or if that was also a direction choice. I
don't know. I can't tell you that, but I can just tell you that it's there.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
But the thing I did not expect was that Longfellow Deeds in the original will occasionally get violent and beat the shit out of people. Yeah. Which I could have sworn was a Adam Sandler edition.
Nope, and instead, not here.
Not only that, there's the scene where he goes out with Winona Ryder, and he gets made fun of by a bunch of rich muckety mucks, and he goes, if she wasn't here, I'd beat the shit out of you, and she goes, oh, I don't mind, and he beats the shit out of him.
Yeah, and like
that exact thing happens in the original. The exact same thing where she goes, "Oh, I don't mind," and then he just The only difference is in the Adam Sandler film, it's like comical, like fighting, and it ends with a fat opera singer shitting his pants.
Yeah.
And the original, it's like a sudden moment of like real violence. Like those punches feel real in the original. It feels like if you were there actually in that moment. You know? Like you suddenly just see a dude just punch another human being.
And God, I should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about how cheap Mr. Deeds looks, because like we probably won't be able to talk about as much black and white like photography in our other retrospectives just because of the topics at hand and stuff like that. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is like stunning, I think. I love the look of like old black and white film photography, and there's an extended sequence where Longfellow Deeds and Babe are strolling around at night with like the fog and the lights, and it looks like some Casablanca shit with the way they're staring at each other and like the soft light on their faces, and it's so like romantic and beautiful.
I'll have to take your word for it because I watched it on the Crackle streaming service, which might have the worst quality streaming of any service I've used ever in my life.
I have it on in the background again for this too, and the quality's not great, but it's fine on here. You'd probably be doing yourself a disservice if you're interested.
Mine kept like dropping for whatever reason, like.
Oh, okay.
Although a fun hack you can do, try to rewind it. You won't be able to, but then it'll stop commercials from happening. So I tried to rewind a moment to be like, oh, what did they just say? And then it wouldn't let me. But then I couldn't do anything. But then no more commercials played. So, I don't know.
That's so fucking weird.
Good game, Crackle. But yeah, bringing it back to your point about the look of these films.
Yeah, and then Mr. Deeds is just like, it looks so cheap, and it's so unfortunate.
This is honestly, I will say, the worst looking of the films we've watched so far.
Yeah, especially because I did not have nice things to say about Little Nicky, but just like, I'm so like in awe of the extent of that production design, and like the clear, like, hard work on display. And then here, it's just like, we had a free room. It totally reminded me of Going Overboard, but if they could afford more locations.
Yeah, I think maybe everyone at Happy Madison was humbled a little bit by how bad Little Nicky did.
Maybe,
and
yeah.
They tried to like play it safe a little bit.
Yeah, but it still cost $50 million. Like,
I guess, yeah, but I don't know. I don't know where the money's.
Moonlight cost $1 million, and that's like one of the best looking movies of like the decade.
Yeah,
even with inflation, like what?
But even as a kid, weird. Like I noticed like tons of little shit in this that bugged me. Because here's a fun fact: I saw this movie in theaters.
Whoa!
This is my first Adam Sandler movie in theaters, and I don't remember how this happened, but my grandmother took me to see it.
Wow.
I think she thought it was going to be Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Like, I think she understood it was a remake. I'm not saying she was, like, delusional, but I don't think she understood who, like, Adam Sandler was.
Mm.
And I think my cousins also, like, talked her into doing it, because I remember they came, too. And I just remember it being a weird film to see with my grandmother. But even as a kid, there's like a scene in the beginning where like a guy takes a picture of him and then jumps off the roof with a parachute, and the parachute comes up in a way that basically goes, the guy clearly just jumped off a film set and then landed on a mat, because the fucking parachute doesn't change at all. And I noticed that as a child. I'm talking about like 9 years old. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you. It's really, really disappointing to see that quality dip. I can't believe I just said that about an Adam Sandler film, but there you go.
Well, let's talk about the cast, as you said, is really good.
An hour into this, yeah.
Yeah. I think Winona Ryder really stole the film, but then the film went missing.
Is that a Norm Macdonald joke?
Yeah. No, Winona Ryder took the stand today, and now the stand is missing.
Oh.
Because I believe this was shot before, but released after her big scandal where she stole things.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of ends up like
it fucks her career up.
But it does mess it up for a minute there, huh?
Well, she's only kind of like just come back. Like there was a couple years before Stranger Things where she would pop up in like a supporting role in something, and you'd be like, "Oh fuck
God,
yeah,
she's
Winona!"
Black Swan.
I know. And you'd be like, "Fuck yeah, and Winona Ryder's great. Like, when is she gonna come back?" And like, there still hasn't really been that movie for her, but Stranger Things has kind of like helped.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically one of the like the main stars of Stranger Things. Like, not like she is supporting, but like she basically headlines a lot of like the major plot stuff in that too, which is cool.
And to bring it back to, not because I don't want to dunk on Winona Ryder too much.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, I understand that when she did that, she was in like a very difficult emotional place and whatever. But also, I mean, it's kind of cool that she stole all that shit. Like,
I'm pro stealing.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where I feel like if not to be ridiculous, but I feel like if a dude had got caught stealing just as much worth, but maybe if it wasn't designer clothing, there wouldn't have been as much hullabaloo about it.
Well, one, if it was a dude, and
I should say rich.
Actually, you know what? No, that's kind of it.
I think rich, famous white dude. Because if it had been a poor black person, they would still be in prison.
Oh, yeah.
So there's the sliding scale of fairness.
Yeah, and like just considering how many like genuine scumbags in Hollywood still have like thriving careers, like, and never like really miss a beat. Like, come on, like that's total like bullshit. That like, yeah,
it's ridiculous.
A big bump in the road for
her. Yeah, well, at least...
But yeah, no, I like her in this. I like her a lot in this, actually.
At least Harvey Weinstein's going to prison.
Yeah. Fuck him.
One man is going to teach high society.
All right, baby, I'm ready for you. Oh, my bad.
Some small-town fun.
Am I out or safe?
Hey, Mr. D! Rich boy.
He doesn't deserve this. I would do anything to take back what I did to him.
I'm sorry. All I heard was blah, blah, blah. I'm a dirty tramp.
Adam Sandler.
Put some steam on it, kid. Ooh, that got you right in the throat, huh?
Mr. D.
All right. Well, Matt, where can the people find you?
I'm at EmperorOTN1 at Twitter.com.
And you can follow me at the Diego Crespo on Twitter. Check out the Waffle Press on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify,
Crazy
iTunes.
Eyes crashes the car at the end of the movie.
Oh, yeah. But he's okay.
Don't worry. He crashes like going 100 straight into a tree. He's fine, though.
Check out the Waffle Press on Patreon.
We also didn't even talk about Alan Covert.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't talk about Jared Harris.
No, but I also didn't mention Peter Gallagher, who's great at playing an asshole.
He is very good at being the asshole.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in this movie.
It's too many. We don't have time
Can
for
we
that.
just talk about how none of those news scenes made any sense?
No.
Like, there's suddenly the footage of the movie, which always bugs me.
Oh, yeah. In fact, they make less sense than the way I'm about to end this episode.
Throwing cats out a window?
What?
I got wicked bad frostbite when I was in the Scouts. Just whacked my foot. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Didn't feel it. Isn't that awesome? Go ahead. Enjoy the foot. I know you're starting to like it, aren't you? Ow! You're sick! You're sick! Why would you do that to me? I'm just kidding you, pal.